Hello and welcome to Faith with Flavor. On today's show, we will be introducing a brand new segment called Candid Confessions. Here we will discuss life issues candidly and discover how to deal with them the biblical way. Our topic today is married life, and joining me today is public speaker Amy Mitchell, Pastor Michelle Hunter, and Pastor Teresa Alvarado. But before we get into our candid confessions, take a look at this video featuring Pastor Heather Flores at Friends Conference 2015, where we got to know her a little better. Thank you so much for watching Faith with Flavor. Today we are here behind the scenes at the Friends Women's Conference here in Santa Ana, California, and I am joined by Pastor Heather Flores. Thank you so much, Pastor Heather, for being here with us.
I'm so blessed to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so what are you looking most forward to at this conference?
Just to see God do something new and fresh in the lives of His girls, because I know we have a lot of influence in the world. Sometimes I think many of us don't realize how much influence we have in the world. And so I think by understanding, first of all, our relationship with God, we're going to be empowered to just do what He's called us to do. And so,
well, that leads me to my next question. Okay. How did you come to know the Lord personally?
Oh, gosh. It was back in 1988, and I had grown up in a very religious church, so I didn't understand. I actually had never heard an altar call, didn't understand the power of God in your life, or that you could live life differently than everybody else. It was just go to church, you know. But by the time I had gone through college in 1988, I had just entered into a lot of sin in my life with relationships and drugs. My parents had divorced, and I had actually gone through having an abortion, and I was a very, very broken young girl. I had tried psychology, I had tried crying to my mom, you know, just alcohol, drinking my sorrows away. Nothing could bring peace in my life, and finally, in a very broken state, I was on my knees. I'll never forget it. I was on my hands and knees, and I looked up and I said, God, if you're real, you know, I need you. And He met me right where I was at. I got saved in a little church, and people began to help me, and I just experienced God. I was plagued with anxiety, and Jesus is what gave me peace. So.
Amen. And so now you are a pastor's wife and a pastor at the Rock Church.
Yes.
And tell me, what is like the most fulfilling thing about being in ministry?
Oh, that's an easy one. Just seeing God's love and His power at work in people's lives, seeing them absolutely radically transformed. And I cannot tell you the joy that I get from that. And, you know, sometimes I think we think that joy is just a positive emotion, but I believe it is literally the presence of God that we're experiencing, because we're seeing Him move. And we've seen bodies healed. Cancer just healed like that. I just read a testimony last week at church about a woman that was so fatigued. She had quit her job. She couldn't cook for her family, nothing. And she had gone to the altar for prayer when we were praying for the sick. And I mean, her text to me was just unbelievable. That she's like, Heather, I lived life with well-being for the first time. I mean, she is just completely transformed. We have people that have been blessed with children after trying for 7 years, and marriage is being restored. And just to hear people coming to me and seeing them come in broken, and you can see it all over them. And then to see them, and you just see life.
And Pastor Tom is a Hispanic.
Yes.
What is one of the best things about, you know, being with a Hispanic?
I love their love for family. He's an amazing husband, amazing father, and not to mention I love Mexican food.
Oh.
He makes the best tacos in the world. But I just love, I think more than anything, I've seen their love and support. The connection that they have as family is just a beautiful thing. So I love that about the Hispanic culture.
Well, today we are here at a women's conference, so I want you to look into that camera, Heather, for me right now, and just speak life into the women that are watching through TBN Salsa.
Okay. Girls, I just want you to know that you are fearfully and wonderfully made for a great purpose, and that you need just to seek the Father. Seek Him not just through going to church services, but spend time with Him and get in His presence. And He's not like a man that won't tell you, you know, sometimes with people, they'll hold back on us. They won't tell us everything about themselves. You know, you've heard stories of people say, oh my gosh, I was married to somebody for all these years and I didn't even know him. God's not that way. We get in His presence, and even though we may feel like He's so great, He's willing to open His heart to us. He's willing to share His dreams with us and His plans with us, and to just take us by the hand on the greatest adventure of our lives. So just get in His presence, seek Him for His will, trust His love for you, because he loves you more than any person ever could. And I'm telling you, you'll go on the greatest, most joyous adventure of your life.
If you just started tuning in to Faith with Flavor, that was a behind-the-scenes interview at Friends Conference 2015. And today on the show, we are introducing a brand new segment called Candid Confessions, with our first topic being all about marriage. Ladies, thank you so much for being on set here with me. I feel like this is just, another day where girls get to come together and talk, girl talk, right?
Yes, we're so excited to be here.
Yeah, so why don't we have each of you just introduce each other. So Teresa, we'll start with you.
Hello, I am a pastor's wife at Word of Life, Orange County. My husband and I have been married for 25 years, together 30 years. So 5 outside of the things of God and 25 with the Lord. Very different.
Yes,
Yeah.
Awesome. And what about you, Michelle?
I'm Michelle Hunter. I pastor a church along with my husband in Long Beach. We are going on 8 years of marriage, although we have been married, divorced, and remarried to each other. The first about 4.5 years were absolute hell together, and then we went through 10 months of divorce, separation and divorce, and now we have just an amazing marriage.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, Amy, you're next.
I'm Amy Mitchell, and I've been married for 7 years to my awesome husband. We have a 3-year-old little girl, and I'm a speaker I have an online mentorship program called Spirit Grow, and just loving life right now.
Love it. A bunch of women serving God and in ministry with their husbands. I'm admired by that. And you know what? A pastor once told me that a way to stay, married is to stay newlywed. So in other words, keep it fresh, keep it lively, keep it exciting. Would you guys agree or disagree with that statement?
I would say reality is it's not always going to be new. Because love is, in a marriage, it goes up and down. It's like kind of like a roller coaster. But I think the most important thing is to respect each other. And so long as we continue to respect each other and know that we're going to come across different times in our life that may not be exciting, yes, we want to stay on fire, but the reality is that it's not always going to be fire. So we just have to continue to press in our relationship.
Okay, what about you, Michelle?
Well, as far as keeping it fresh and new, I think it's really important to make time for each other. We get so busy in our lives, especially when we're in ministry, or when you have children, little children, you get so busy that life kind of takes over and you get away from the things that you did when you were first married or even when you were first dating, which is going out and doing fun things together or exploring and having new adventures together. So I think that those things are important. And yes, the reality is it's not always going to be fresh and new, but you can keep things progressing forward if you're actually taking the time for one another.
Yeah.
Very good, very good.
I think it's kind of a mixture of both, having the new and having the stability, because I've been married for 7 years, and the first couple of years was actually really hard, but we still were able to have go out on date nights. We were still actively dating each other, but after a while, sometimes you have to push for that to keep going out on date nights. But I also needed the stability of knowing I want, exciting and, what's new and exciting, but I also want to know, it's okay to stay home and just chill sometimes, sit by the fireplace. It doesn't have to be elaborate, but that's how we kind of keep it, new and old at the same time.
Definitely.
So,
keep dating and keep seeking after each other and putting each other, of course, God is first, but then marriage is second. It's equally important. Now, I called this segment Candid Confessions because I really wanted it to be a place where we could just freely just talk and, be raw, be organic with each other, because I feel like when we're able to be raw and talk about the issues, we're able to get through them, right? Because no marriage is perfect. And so a question I have for you guys is, how can we rekindle that love when fill in the blank? We'll start with you, Michelle.
Okay. So in our marriage, we've been through everything from infidelity to physical abuse to emotional, mental abuse, drug addiction. We've really dealt with, I think, everything. Even we had a son pass away during our marriage. So we've really been through it all. And in order to keep the love fire going, it's really important to look at your partner through the eyes of compassion. Because when someone does something to you, when your husband or your wife does something to you that's hurtful and that's detrimental, it's really because they're broken. It's not because there's necessarily something wrong with you. So when you can look through the eyes of compassion, it really frees you up from being so hurt that you would, run the opposite direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you bring up a really good point because, I know there's a lot of people out there that struggle with, infidelity and all of that. How did you personally get to a place where you could say, okay, I forgive you, let's move on, let's get past this, and let's start over in a way, because that's really what you had to do, right?
Absolutely. Again, it's seeing through the eyes of God. It's looking at in my case, looking at my husband and saying, for him to get to that place, there was something very broken within him. It's not about me. So when we're in marriage, we get so offended and so hurt about what's being done to us and how unfair it is. And that's really the wrong perspective to have, because our husband or wife doesn't set out. We don't get married with the intention of cheating or beating or hurting our partner. That's not the intention. To keep our perspective straight and looking through those eyes and really making the determination that, marriage is the perfect picture of the relationship of God with people, right? And as people, we're not perfect, and God continuously looks at us through the eyes of compassion. As far as making the choice, it is a choice you have to make to get past the hurtful things. And in making that choice, you're honoring God, number one. Because as far as I'm concerned, in everything that we've been through, there is no reason for divorce. There is no excuse.
Wow.
There isn't. When you get married, you're making a covenant for better, for worse. It doesn't mean for better, for worse, except if he cheats on me, or except if he hits me. It's for better, for worse. And when you honor God that way, God can literally take all those broken pieces and bring them all back together.
Okay, Teresa, we'll start with you now.
I believe the same thing. I believe that we need to own what belongs to us and not own what belongs to them. There's many things that I came into this relationship with, lots of baggage. My husband came into the same, in the same way. He was married, separated, we got together, and he was still married, and we went through all of that. So I was one of the other women, because there was many, and I just happened to be the one that he stayed with. So coming in to my relationship, we were together for 5 years outside of God, and then I received the Lord at 24. I had to really, I think the key to success and overcoming is by us looking at ourselves, owning what belongs to us, and not taking personal the attitudes at times, or the breakdowns that our spouse may have, or us with them. So long as we just own what's ours.
And sometimes that could be very difficult, because the instinct in us, sometimes you just want to defend yourself. Like, no, he is not going to talk to me like that, or whatever the case may be. Amy, what do you have to say about that?
That I think that from personal experience, a lot of times we don't realize and recognize the pride that's inside of us, and so we sometimes are so quick to point out what we don't like in our spouse that we forget that they're human just like us. They make problems, mistakes just like us. They've got problems they're going through. And so, it's kind of easier to think of that way in your mind when you're dealing with someone outside of your family. Yes. I'm in ministry. I'm going to be praying for this person. They're going through stuff, and then we get married and we go home and we're like, this guy, he should know better. You know, he should not be talking to me this way. Like, he knows who I am. We've been married for so long.
Yeah.
But we forget that we can allow pride to kind of seep up into our heart. And if we don't notice it and we don't own that in ourselves and, you know, ask God to take that out of us, then we start treating our spouse, you know, harshly. You know, we kind of omit grace from our relationship because we're so focused on what is right. You know, I think women, we because we're nurturers, you know, we're kind of protectors of relationships, of children, and we raise children. It's like we have this natural instinct to make sure that everything is right and make sure that everything is protected and in order, and this is how things are going. And so when we see something out of line in that, then we lash out, you know, and it's kind of an instinct to protect. But if we're not careful, we allow it to turn into pride, and then we've just ruined. We keep hurting our spouses and hurting our, you know, maybe our children that we're frustrated with.
And I think part of that is really just bad communication.
Yeah.
You know, there's a saying that people say, women are from Venus and men are from Mars. Right. But Amy, how do you feel that men and women communicate differently?
Okay. When you said that, the first thing that popped into mind, when I go into schools and I talk with kids about the differences between how guys and girls communicate, and the example that I use is that men are like waffles and girls are like spaghetti, because men are in this, I mean, they can disconnect things. Like women, we're emotional. It's easy for us to connect the emotions to the facts that we're facing. And so that's how we can remember, you know, 10 years ago, you know, my spouse, you know, mentioned something about my shoes, and now he's like talking about my shoes again. I remember that. You didn't like my shoes before. And so, you know, or...
Because women remember everything.
We remember everything. That's how I can say, you know, how can you not see that, you know, your disgust for the onions I put in the spaghetti is not the same way that, you know, you just forgot to take the trash out last night, because I feel the same way. So I'm kind of putting the two together. And so when we're emotional, as emotional beings, you know, it's easy for us to mix everything together like spaghetti. You know, it's all connected. Our emotions are all connected to everything. Guys, you know, they have this amazing ability. It's really cool to like disconnect from everything. You know, the Cowboys lost. That sucks. Okay, my wife is mad, and I told her hair looks good, but at least I noticed it. Okay, that's awesome. And the next box, you know, maybe I'm hungry. It's time to eat.
Yeah.
So, you know, they have this awesome ability to connect and communicate differently. And if we can appreciate those aspects about them, and they can appreciate that about us, somehow I think we can compromise on how we communicate with each other.
Yes, and also I think just learning what those are, you know, because we really do communicate differently. And one example that I could use in my own personal life is, you know, when he tells me a story about something that happened on his day, I immediately want to share something about my day that happened, and his response is, oh, well, it's all about you, isn't it? And I'm like, well, I'm just trying to relate to you, you know? But what kind of advice can you guys, the older generation, give us, the younger generation, to kind of cope with those communication differences?
I would say, as women, we need to learn how to listen. We need to learn to, because we always want to talk. We think that what we have to say is more important than what they have to say. And we're built that way. We just like to talk. And men, you know, they don't have that same capacity of words. And I don't think they have the ability to listen to all of that either.
Right.
What about you, Michelle? What do you...
Well, you know, I was thinking about a couple of things that you guys said that made me, like, actually a light bulb went off. Men are so basic in their speaking, and she just said men don't have that kind of vocabulary or the capacity to listen to all of the detail, because women, we want all the detail in there. Well, what did they look like, and what were they doing, and what were they saying, and, you know, what were they wearing when they said that while they were doing that, you know? And men just don't care about all of that, nor do they notice all of that. But as so women, women tend to speak in code. It's like for some reason we think that men should understand what we're trying to imply. And my encouragement to women is just to be real and to speak basic, and to just keep it simple. When you're trying to relay something to your husband, keep it really simple and basic. Don't speak in code. Don't try to get him to pick up on on the clues you're trying to give to him, because he's not going to do it.
You kind of have to be very blunt, right?
Yes.
Be blunt, be honest,
Yeah.
keep it real and simple,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another way to really understand communication differences is also understanding what our love language is. And there's this amazing quiz out there, which I'm actually going to put up on my social media sites for all of you to be able to find out what your love language is as well. And it really tells you, how we love differently. Mine, for example, and I'm fortunate to have my husband and I, we both have the same love language, which
That is fortunate.
touch, and we want to feel connected. We like the touch. But what about you guys? What's your love language, and how do you communicate that to your husband? We'll start with Amy.
Okay. Well, it's kind of funny because my second love language kind of matches his. My first is acts of kindness.
Okay.
So we were talking earlier, and we were joking about it, but you could forget my anniversary, you could forget my birthday, anything important, but if you forget to take out the trash, I'm like devastated. So it's a strong love language of mine, and sometimes guys don't realize that even for someone like me who is acts of kindness, the smallest things that are helpful are super huge. He asked me how I was feeling the other day. And could he, what did he ask? Get Evie dressed for school. And so I was like, yes. And I just felt this weight, just kind of. And so it affected me emotionally, and it made me feel his love. And
Very nice.
and his love language is gifts. He likes to receive gifts, which is kind of sad for him because, mine's the opposite of that. I don't need gifts. And so I have to really push myself to remember, that's how he receives love. And if I don't express that love to him, then I'm not showing him love, even though, it's something that I don't need. He needs it.
And you bring up an excellent point, because it really is about, putting your needs aside and tending to the needs of your spouse, and almost being a servant, which is what we're all called to do. What about you, Teresa? What's yours?
My love language, the first one is quality time.
Okay.
It's quality time. And my husband will interpret that as going to a movie and sitting there for 2 hours and then going home. And I try to explain to him that that's not what it means. His is acts of kindness as well. And what I need to be careful of is not impose my love language on him. So I want him to respond to me the way that I, with my love language, and I can't do that.
Right.
Okay, Michelle, you're up.
So my number one is quality time, and number two is physical touch. And I've noticed over the years that, because I've known this for a long time, we did the love languages, years and years ago. But they tend to change a little bit. I think as you become more comfortable in yourself, and although the love languages are so important, and it's good to know what your partner's love language is, so that you can really sew into that. It's also important not to weigh too heavily on that, so that you're not dependent upon your husband or your wife to actually fill that need in you, so that you're not depending on them to set the tone of your day, or of what's going on in your life.
Okay, another question I have for you guys is, how do we build a man who has been broken down? Because I know there's so many women out there who might not have the ideal situation of marrying a pastor or someone that is, really seasoned in the things of the Lord. And, a lot of these men are really broken. How can we be that person that really just speaks life into their husband? Teresa, we'll start with you. I know your husband, has a background of drug history and stuff. How did you deal with that, in your marriage?
First of all, we have to realize that our husbands are men and not boys. We respect and we treat people a certain way according to the way that we feel about them. And for so many years, my husband was treated like a boy. He was married before. And in that, I began to, outside of God, I began to speak words that were words of life, words of affirmation. And, he used drugs, he chased women, and he was an alcoholic. And when I came into the things of God, I learned more and more about how to do that. And I would say, you're going to work in the church, you're going to preach the word, and you're going to serve the Lord. And I did that for quite some time, and today that's exactly what he's doing. So it's just words of life.
God. Praise God. What about you, Michelle? Dealing with infidelity and all these crazy things, the death of your son. How possibly were you able to recuperate from that and really just speak life into your husband?
I think the most important thing is that you don't point out the things that are negative or wrong with your husband. There was a lot of things. My husband was really abusive and just the complete opposite for the first, 4.5, 5 years that we were married than he is today, because he was very broken. So the longer that you point out those things, the more that he is going to rise to the occasion to meet you where your words are speaking to him at. So
that's good.
it's God's job to convict him of the things that are wrong with him. It's God's job to, really deal with those things. So as a wife, the best thing that you can do for your husband is to praise him, is to build up the things. Even if it's one thing that he's amazing at, that's the thing that you're constantly talking about and praising him for. And never pointing out those things, because he knows what's wrong with him. He knows his shortcomings. You don't need to point them out.
Yeah. I have a question for both you, Teresa and Michelle. What are some tips that you can give that can kind of help us to kind of choose our battles wisely? I think as women, it's easy for us to, find all the things that are wrong in that whole entire day. But what's a good way for us to choose our battles wisely?
Do you want
Michelle?
Go ahead. Perspective. Keep your perspective straight, because I know for me, huge things that just drove me insane that maybe I didn't vocalize but really came out in my behavior, like I'd stomp around or be really internally upset about, were like, how the dishwasher got loaded or how it didn't get loaded or whether the trash got taken out or not. When you realize that you get to do life with your husband and you get to do life with this man that God has blessed you with, no matter how big his imperfections are at that moment, the things like the trash or the dishwasher just don't matter anymore. It's really important to really weigh things. Am I going to remember next week how upset, or even, so today if I'm really upset about something, am I going to remember next week what it was about? So you just let those things go.
Thank you guys so much for being here. That is all the time we have. Unfortunately, we can go on forever, right?
Good.
But we're going to keep all the marriages out there in prayer. And I just want to thank you so much for tuning in to Faith with Flavor. This has been our first Candid Confessions. Don't forget to email me your comments and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. God bless you. Bye-bye.